I have sat on this bench for 4 decades. I have heard lies told with confidence. I have watched defendants smile at me like I was something they had already paid to handle. I have seen the full spectrum of human arrogance and human decency, sometimes in the same case, sometimes in the same sentence. But on the morning of April 7th at 9:47 a.m., a woman looked me in the eyes from 8 feet away and said something that no one has ever said to me in 40 years of presiding over this courtroom. She said, "Your Honor, with all due respect, my husband built 3 hospitals in this city. He has donated more money than you will ever earn in your lifetime. So I would appreciate it if we could skip the theatrics and handle this like adults." She said it calmly, she said it clearly, and she said it in front of a full gallery, a court reporter, 2 bailiffs, and a 68-year-old woman sitting in a wheelchair with a broken collarbone who had been pushed down a staircase by the woman standing in front of me. That woman's name was Victoria Ashford. She was 41 years old. She was married to Garrett Ashford, the founder and CEO of Ashford Capital Partners, a private equity firm that managed over $1.2 billion in assets. The Ashford name was stitched into the fabric of this city. Hospital wings, scholarship programs, a community arts center that bore their name in bronze letters above the entrance. They sat on boards, they attended galas, they smiled for photographs in magazines that most people flip through in waiting rooms. And Victoria Ashford believed, with the full weight of her lifestyle behind that belief, that none of this applied to her. But before I tell you what I said back to her, before I tell you what her husband did when he arrived at this courthouse, and before I tell you about the moment that made the entire gallery stand on their feet, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now. Tell me where you are watching this from. Are you in Dallas, Istanbul, London, Lagos, Manila? I want to know, because this story is about to cross every border and every tax bracket. Type your city right now. I read every single comment. And if you are not subscribed, hit that button immediately, because what happens in this courtroom in the next 34 minutes is something I have never experienced in 4 decades on the bench. Not once. Let me tell you about the victim first, because you need to understand who was sitting in that wheelchair before you can understand the full weight of what Victoria Ashford did to her. Her name was Dolores Medina. She was 68 years old. She had spent 42 years as a housekeeper, not at a hotel, not at a resort, in private homes, wealthy private homes. She had cleaned floors and folded sheets and organized closets and scrubbed bathrooms for families whose children went to private schools, whose cars cost more than Dolores would make in 5 years, whose dinner parties required a level of invisible labor that only people like Dolores understood. Dolores had worked for the Ashford family for 11 years. 11 years of showing up at 6:30 every morning, leaving at 7 every evening, 6 days a week. She ironed Garrett Ashford's shirts. She organized Victoria's closets by color, then by season, then by designer, because Victoria had a system and Dolores had learned it. She polished the floors in the Ashford estate on her hands and knees because Victoria did not trust the cleaning machine. She cooked meals when the private chef was off. She watched the Ashford children when the nanny called in sick. In 11 years, Dolores Medina had never taken a vacation. She had never called in sick. She had never been late. She was paid $14.50 an hour with no benefits, no health insurance, no retirement, and no written employment contract. She was, in every measurable sense, invisible labor, dressed in a uniform, and called by her first name by people who never once asked about hers. On the morning of March 22nd, Dolores was cleaning the second-floor hallway of the Ashford estate. She had been experiencing back pain for several weeks, severe back pain, the kind that makes you stop mid-step and hold the wall. She had not seen a doctor because she had no insurance and because she could not afford to miss a day. That morning, while carrying a basket of laundry down the main staircase, her back seized and she stumbled. The basket hit the wall. A ceramic vase on a hallway table, a decorative piece Victoria had purchased in Milan for $4,200, wobbled and fell to the marble floor. It shattered. Victoria Ashford heard it from the kitchen. She came up those stairs in seconds. She looked at the broken vase on the floor. She looked at Dolores, who was gripping the banister, barely standing, clearly in pain. And according to Dolores' testimony, according to the security camera footage that Victoria's own attorney did not know existed, Victoria Ashford walked up to Dolores Medina, grabbed her by the shoulder, and shoved her down 6 marble stairs. Dolores landed at the bottom. She did not get up. She could not get up. She lay there for 4 minutes before anyone came. A broken collarbone, 2 fractured ribs, a herniated disc that would require surgery she could not afford, bruising across her left hip and thigh that took 6 weeks to fade. She was 68 years old, and she was lying at the bottom of a marble staircase in a house she had cleaned for 11 years because a woman worth $800 million was angry about a vase. The paramedics were called, not by Victoria, but by the gardener, a man named Tomas, who had heard the fall from outside and come running. When the paramedics arrived, Victoria was in the kitchen on her phone. She told them Dolores had fallen, just fallen. Clumsy, she said. She's getting old. These things happen. That is what she said about a woman who had spent 11 years on her hands and knees keeping that house spotless. Now I want you to pause for a second. I want you to think about someone in your life, a parent, a grandmother, an aunt, someone who worked their whole life doing hard, invisible, unglamorous work so that someone else's world could stay clean and comfortable and beautiful. Think about that person. Now imagine them at the bottom of a staircase because someone decided a $4,200 vase was worth more than their body. If that thought makes your blood move, drop a like right now. Not later, right now, because this story is about to turn in a direction you are not expecting, and I need you with me when it does. Dolores Medina filed a police report from her hospital bed. Her daughter, a woman named Carmen, had driven 90 miles when she got the call. Carmen was 34, a legal assistant at a small firm in the Valley. She knew enough about the law to know that what had happened to her mother was not an accident. She asked the hospital for detailed medical records. She asked the police to obtain the Ashford security footage. And when the police told her that the Ashford family's attorney had already called to express that the family would prefer to resolve this privately, Carmen Medina said 4 words that changed everything. She said, "We will see them in court." Victoria Ashford was charged with assault causing bodily harm to a person over 65, a charge that carries enhanced penalties in this state. Her attorney, a man named Preston Calloway, one of the most expensive criminal defense attorneys in the city, filed motion after motion to delay. He requested a change of venue. He challenged the admissibility of the security footage. He filed a motion to dismiss based on what he described as inconsistencies in Dolores' initial statement to police. Inconsistencies that turned out to be nothing more than an elderly woman in severe pain describing events in a slightly different order 20 minutes apart. Every motion was denied, and on the morning of April 7th, Victoria Ashford walked into my courtroom. She was wearing a navy Chanel suit. Her hair was styled. Her jewelry was understated but unmistakably expensive. She carried herself with the posture of a woman who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. She sat at the defense table and arranged her things as though she were at a business lunch. She did not look at Dolores. She did not acknowledge the wheelchair. She did not glance at Carmen. It was as though they were furniture. I called the case. I asked Preston Calloway how his client pleaded. Not guilty, Your Honor. Of course. I then asked the prosecution to present the evidence. The assistant district attorney, a sharp, meticulous woman named Angela Reeves, walked the court through the timeline. She presented the medical records. She presented the paramedic report. She presented Dolores' testimony. And then she presented the footage. The Ashford estate had 14 security cameras. Victoria's attorney had argued that the footage from the hallway camera was corrupted, unusable. What he did not know, what no one knew until Angela Reeves stood in my courtroom and said it, was that the Ashford security system backed up to a cloud server. And that server had a mirror. The footage was crystal clear, time-stamped, high definition, no gaps. We played it on the courtroom monitor. You could see Dolores carrying the laundry basket. You could see her back seize. You could see the basket hit the table. You could see the vase fall. And then you could see Victoria come up those stairs, look at the broken vase, look at Dolores, grab her shoulder, and push. Not a nudge, not a reaction. A deliberate, two-handed shove that sent a 68-year-old woman down 6 marble stairs. The courtroom was silent for 5 full seconds after the footage ended. I have never counted silence in a courtroom before. I counted that one. I looked at Victoria. Miss Ashford, you have watched the same footage this courtroom just watched. Would you like to revise your plea? She looked at Preston Calloway. He leaned in and whispered something. She pulled back from him and looked directly at me. And that is when she said it. Your Honor, with all due respect, my husband built 3 hospitals in this city. He has donated more money than you will ever earn in your lifetime. So I would appreciate it if we could skip the theatrics and handle this like adults. The gallery made a sound I have heard very few times. It was not a gasp. It was lower than that. It was the sound people make when they cannot believe what they just heard and are deciding what to feel about it. Anger and shock compressed into a single exhale from 40 people at once. I removed my glasses. I set them on the bench. I folded my hands. Ms. Ashford, I said, I want to make sure the record reflects what you just said. You told this court that your husband's donations should influence how I conduct these proceedings. You told me, a sitting judge, that his wealth exceeds my worth. And you called the process of holding you accountable for shoving a 68-year-old woman down a staircase theatrics. Do I have that correct? She blinked. For the first time, something shifted behind her eyes. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it, Miss Ashford? I just meant that we are reasonable people. This doesn't need to be a spectacle. A spectacle, I repeated. Ms. Ashford, the spectacle was a 68-year-old woman lying at the bottom of your staircase for 4 minutes while you stood in your kitchen and called her clumsy. That was the spectacle. Her jaw tightened. And for the record, I continued, I don't care if your husband built every hospital in this country. I don't care if he donated his entire fortune to charity this morning. None of that changes what is on that footage. None of that changes the fact that Dolores Medina has a broken collarbone, fractured ribs, and a herniated disc because you were angry about a vase. Your husband's checkbook is not a legal defense. Not in this courtroom, not ever. Preston Calloway stood up quickly. Your Honor, my client spoke out of frustration. She did not intend to impugn the court. Sit down, Mr. Calloway. Your client impugned this court the moment she walked in 25 minutes late without an apology. She impugned this court when she refused to look at the woman she put in a wheelchair. And she impugned this court when she told me her husband's money matters more than my judgment. I have heard enough. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. I need you to drop a comment and answer this question honestly. Have you ever worked for someone who treated you like you were invisible? someone who never learned your last name, someone who expected you to be grateful for the privilege of serving them. Tell me your story, because Dolores Medina's story is not rare. It is common. It happens in homes across the world every single day. And the only reason we are talking about it right now is because Carmen Medina refused to let it stay invisible. Share this video right now. Send it to one person, a friend, a parent, a coworker who cleans offices at night, a caregiver who has never been thanked. Send it to them because they need to know that what happened in this courtroom matters. I turned to Dolores Medina. She was sitting in her wheelchair in the front row of the gallery. Carmen was beside her, one hand on her mother's arm. "Mrs. Medina," I said, "would you like to address the court?" Dolores looked at Carmen. Carmen nodded. Dolores wheeled herself forward slightly. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but absolutely steady. "Your Honor," she said, "I have cleaned houses for 42 years. I have cleaned for families who were kind and families who were not. I have been on my knees scrubbing floors since I was 26 years old. I never complained. I never asked for anything I did not earn. I showed up every day because that is what I was raised to do." She paused. She looked down at her hands. "I cleaned that woman's house for 11 years. I knew where every glass went. I knew which towels she liked folded in thirds and which ones she liked rolled. I knew her children's shoe sizes. I knew that her husband drinks his coffee with 1 sugar and no cream. I knew that house better than my own." Her voice cracked just once, and she pulled it back. "And when I broke that vase, she pushed me down those stairs like I was nothing, like 11 years of my hands in her home meant nothing, like I was something to throw away." She looked at Victoria for the first time. "I am not nothing. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I have a name. It is Dolores Medina. And I came here today because I want my grandchildren to know that even people like me deserve to be treated like human beings." The courtroom was completely still. I saw 2 jurors wipe their eyes. I saw a reporter in the back row close her notebook and just listen. I turned back to Victoria Ashford. Her composure was fracturing. The armor of wealth and indifference was cracking. And what was underneath was not remorse, not yet. It was fear, the raw, unfamiliar fear of a person who has never faced a consequence that money could not soften. "Miss Ashford," I said, "you heard Mrs. Medina. You heard a woman who gave your household 11 years of labor. Describe what it felt like to be pushed down your staircase and called clumsy. Do you have any response?" Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was upset about the vase. "The vase," I repeated. "It was irreplaceable. I bought it in Milan. Irreplaceable," I said. "Do you know what else is irreplaceable, Miss Ashford? Mrs. Medina's mobility before you pushed her. The disc in her spine that now requires surgery. The 11 years she gave your household in good faith. Those are irreplaceable. A vase is an object. A human being is not." Victoria's attorney put a hand on her arm. She shook it off. And then, in the kind of moment that only happens in a courtroom, when someone's entire self-image is collapsing in real time, Victoria Ashford said something extraordinary. She should have been more careful. The gallery erupted. The bailiff stood. Carmen Medina gripped the arm of her mother's wheelchair so hard her knuckles went white. I waited. I let the room settle. "Miss Ashford," I said, "she should have been more careful. That is your position. A 68-year-old woman with chronic back pain, earning $14.50 an hour with no health insurance, carrying your laundry down your marble staircase at 6:45 in the morning, should have been more careful. That is what you want this court to record." Victoria said nothing. "I have heard enough," I said. I delivered the sentence. Victoria Ashford, on the charge of assault causing bodily harm to a person over the age of 65, I find you guilty. The evidence is not ambiguous. The footage is not open to interpretation. You pushed a 68-year-old woman down a flight of stairs because she accidentally broke a decorative object, and then you told the paramedics she fell. I paused. Here is what this court orders. 180 days in the county correctional facility. No work release. No house arrest. Actual incarceration. You will sit in a cell and you will think about what your hands did on March 22nd. Victoria gasped. Preston Calloway was on his feet. Your Honor, this is... I am not finished, Mr. Calloway. You will pay full restitution for all medical expenses, including the spinal surgery Mrs. Medina requires. You will pay her lost wages for the period of her recovery. You will fund 2 years of physical rehabilitation at a facility of her choosing. You will complete 300 hours of community service at a senior care facility, not as a donor, not as a board member, as a volunteer who shows up and does the work. You will write a formal letter of apology to Dolores Medina to be read aloud in this courtroom at your compliance hearing. And your husband's next hospital donation? I suggest he name a wing after the woman who kept his household running for 11 years on $14.50 an hour while he was building his empire. The gallery erupted, not in disorder, in something that sounded, for the first time in a long time in my courtroom, like belief, like the sound people make when they see the system do exactly what it is supposed to do. Victoria was crying. Her attorney was gathering papers. And then the courtroom doors opened. Garrett Ashford walked in. He was wearing a gray suit, no tie. His face was drawn. He had been watching from a live feed, I learned later. His attorney had set it up. He had watched the entire proceeding from a car outside the courthouse because he did not want his presence to become a distraction. He walked down the center aisle. He did not look at Victoria. He walked past the defense table. He walked directly to the front of the courtroom, to the gallery, to where Dolores Medina sat in her wheelchair. And Garrett Ashford, CEO of Ashford Capital Partners, a man who managed $1.2 billion in assets, knelt down in front of a 68-year-old housekeeper and said, Dolores, I am sorry. I am sorry for what happened in my home. I am sorry that I did not know what was happening under my own roof. And I am sorry that in 11 years, I never once asked you how you were. Dolores looked at him for a long time. Then she reached forward and put her hand on his arm. You were always kind to me, Mr. Ashford. You always said good morning. He broke. Right there, kneeling on the courtroom floor, Garrett Ashford put his face in his hands and cried. Victoria watched from the defense table. Her face was unreadable. Something was happening behind her eyes that I could not name but recognized. It was the beginning of understanding. The very first crack in the wall between who she had been and who she might someday, with enough time and enough pain, learn to become. I addressed the courtroom one final time. I want everyone in this room to remember what just happened. Not the sentence, not the footage, not the money. What just happened is that a man who runs a billion-dollar company knelt on a courtroom floor in front of the woman who ironed his shirts because he understood something his wife did not, that the people who take care of us, who clean our homes, who carry our laundry, who show up at 6:30 in the morning and leave at 7 o'clock at night, those people are not invisible. They are the foundation. Dolores Medina worked for 42 years on her hands and knees. She raised a daughter who became the reason this case made it to court. She sat in that wheelchair with a broken collarbone and told this room her name. That took more courage than anything else I witnessed today. And Victoria Ashford, when you are sitting in that cell, I want you to think about one thing, not the vase, not the money. I want you to think about the fact that in 11 years, you never learned that Dolores has 3 grandchildren. Their names are Sophia, Miguel, and Anna. Sophia wants to be a teacher. Miguel wants to be a firefighter. And Anna, who is 4 years old, draws pictures for her grandmother every Sunday. You never knew that because you never asked. Start asking. I struck the gavel. 4 months later, I received a letter from Dolores Medina. She had her surgery. She was recovering. Carmen had moved closer to be with her during rehabilitation. The letter was short. It said, "Your Honor, I can stand again. Not all the way yet, but I can stand. Thank you for letting me stand in your courtroom first." I have kept that letter in my desk drawer. I will keep it there until the day I retire. I also received word that Victoria Ashford had completed her first 60 days of incarceration. The facility reported that she had been difficult initially, demanding accommodations that did not exist, speaking to other inmates as though they were staff. By week 3, something changed. A woman in the facility, a 70-year-old grandmother serving time for a nonviolent offense, had asked Victoria to help her write a letter to her grandson. Victoria had sat with her for 2 hours. She wrote 4 drafts. She helped the woman choose the right words. It was, according to the facility counselor, the first time Victoria Ashford had done something for someone else without being asked, without an audience, without a camera, without a tax deduction. I do not know if Victoria Ashford will become a different person. I have seen transformation happen in my courtroom, and I have seen it fail. I have watched people leave these doors changed, and I have watched people leave these doors exactly the same. But I believe in the possibility. I have to. That is why I still put on this robe. What I do know is this. Dolores Medina walked into my courtroom in a wheelchair and left with her dignity confirmed by the law. Carmen Medina fought for her mother when the system tried to look the other way. And a man who built hospitals knelt on a courtroom floor because he understood that charity without decency is just a performance. That is the lesson. Not the dramatic moment, not the sentence, not the gavel. The lesson is that every human being who works, who shows up, who gives their time and their body and their care to someone else's life deserves to be treated as though they matter, because they do. They always have. If you watch this to the end, you are the reason I tell these stories. Drop a comment right now. Tell me, where are you watching from? Istanbul, Chicago, Manila, Berlin, Sao Paulo? Type your city. I want to see how far justice travels. And answer me this. Have you ever been treated like you were invisible by someone who should have known your name? Tell me. I read every comment, every single one. Subscribe to this channel right now, not as a favor, because next week I have another story, another person who sat across from power and needed this room to work correctly. I will be here. And share this video, not in an hour, right now. Send it to someone who works hard and never gets thanked. Send it to someone who cleans, who cares, who carries. Send it to someone who needs to know that Dolores Medina stood up in a courtroom and said her name, and the whole room listened. Justice is not a guarantee. It is a choice. Choose it every single time. Choose it every single time.